Delighted to welcome Kevin Hollinrake to the show, Conservative MP, also now chairman of the Conservative Party. A very good afternoon to you, Kevin.
Nice to see you, Julia.
Nice. Thank you so much for joining us. So much to talk to you about. I mean, let's start with some of the criminal and migrant stories that are in the news, including the fact that Labour said they want to they have freed 26,000 prisoners early in just 7 months. Hundreds of those are people who've been jailed, men, for more than 10 years. At the same time, they've announced today they're going to basically deport some foreign criminals just to 23 countries to be deporting them as soon as they are convicted, as soon as they are sentenced. If they've got a jail sentence, they go straight away to the airport. Off they go to be deported, and they can appeal from abroad. But we don't know whether or not they're going to serve a single day behind bars, even if they've committed crimes as serious as rape or GBH. Talk to me about the problems in our prisons. Are either of these the solutions?
No, of course not. Far too soft on criminals, particularly those who have been convicted of very serious offences. Those people should serve their time. We need more prison places in the UK for people who are UK citizens who commit crimes. In terms of people who are deported, I'm not against that as long as those people are deported face justice where they're deported to. So you've got to make sure you have arrangements in place that those people go to jail. If people are convicted of serious crimes here, you simply deport them. As Alex Chalk, my former colleague, said, if those people are then can walk freely in their home countries, then that is no form of justice. So we've got to make sure people who are convicted of serious crimes face justice.
I would certainly rather pay my taxes towards the 54 grand of keeping a rapist behind bars than a rapist get deported to be walking freely the next day.
Yeah, he's got to face justice. We've been too soft for too long, Julia. I think you probably agree with that. You know, people have got to understand in this country, if you live in this country, if you're a citizen, you commit a crime, you go to jail. If you are a foreign national, you're going to be deported, you're never coming back, but you'll face justice one way or the other.
But you say that now. Why weren't you lot? I mean, I've got to tackle you on that. Why weren't you lot doing all this when you were in power?
Well, listen, we softened up in many different areas. There's no doubt, though, you know, we should have provided more prison places. But having toughened up some of the sentences and made those sentences longer, so people did face proper justice. But we made our mistakes, Julia. I've said that to you many times on this programme. And I think the reality is we were too soft. Of course, we were all frustrated by that at the time, but nevertheless, there's also lots of pressures on the system all the time too.
And there's a lot of costs. And I know a lot of the time, you know, under Cameron Osborne, you were dealing with the post economic crash. I get all of that. But have you come round to sense since the election, or even in the last year or two before the election, because the polls have said British people aren't happy with what you've done, or did you always think, oh, we're being too soft, we should do more about that? Were you speaking up on this issue behind the scenes, for instance?
I always thought we were too soft. And I'm very pleased now we've got a leader in place, Kemi Badenoch, who was not soft, who was very tough. Yeah, I'm not saying the situation is easy. Governing is difficult because there are limitations on your resources, so you have to make compromises at times. But on too many things, whether it be migration, whether it be deportations, whether it be crime, particularly serious crime, we've been too soft. And of course, I've spoken about those things from the backbenches. I've spoken to ministers about it over the years. And you know, I share responsibility for the position we're in, which is not good enough. But we don't enter politics for simply to be a politician. We enter it to try and improve the system and make things better. I've got 4 children. I worry about those children. I want them to I want to make sure they can walk safely on the streets. So many things I'm concerned about too, just like you are for your family, I'm sure.
Well, that's it. I mean, you echo Robert Jedrick, one of your colleagues, Shadow Justice Secretary. He's written in the papers yesterday that he's got 3 daughters, and he says, you know, he's worried for their safety, particularly with the boat migrants, and particularly with arrival of so many young men into this country, undocumented, all by definition criminals, because they're already criminals at the point they enter the country illegally. Many from countries where they simply do not have the same attitudes towards women and girls. I mean, 70% of the boat migrants are from, let's go through it, I mean, Afghanistan, Iran, Eritrea, Syria and Sudan. Not countries renowned for their wonderfully forward-thinking views on women and children, and indeed on gay people as well. Are you as concerned as he is, and what should we do about it?
Of course I'm concerned. And let's be clear about this. The vast majority of people who come to this country from another nation are not criminals.
Yep.
But nevertheless, there is a disproportionate number of crimes committed by people from some of those nations you refer to. And so you've got to take a very cautious approach to this. And for me, I think particularly in the case of illegal migration, which you just don't know who you're getting, then we've got to stop that in its tracks completely. And we tried to do that through the Rwanda plan, which was blocked by Labour. We finally got it through the Commons and then blocked by the courts. What we've said we will do for things like that, for this illegal migration, where there's much greater uncertainty about whether those people are likely to commit crimes or not, is we're going to scrap the human rights laws that relate to those immigration status, so we can deport people to Rwanda.
Well, hold on a minute. You haven't committed to leaving the European Court or European Convention of Human Rights. That's up for review.
Have committed, what I said and what we've committed to, and I'll talk about that in a second in the ECHR, but what we've committed to is disapplying the ECR regime, in our case, domestic law, the Human Rights Act, from immigration cases. We've already committed to that.
Okay.
Now, whether we leave the ECHR completely, I'm very relaxed about. What Kemi Badenoch has done, she has asked Lord Wolfson, a very eminent lawyer, to look into this and look at the best way of managing the ECHR if we're going to leave.
But you know as well as I do, part of the problem is actually interpretation of the law, and human rights legislation is incorporated into British law. So even leaving that, you've still got your tribunal judges who think that an Albanian son liking his chicken nuggets in Britain, not Albania, is more important, or a paedophile's right to his family life with kids he's not even allowed to see unsupervised, for goodness sake, is more important than the safety of people in this country. You've still got those lawyers in the system. You haven't, those judges, you haven't got a chance of dealing with this issue.
Well, I don't agree with that, but you're right. There is problems right now in terms of interpretation. But the Human Rights Act embeds the principles of the European Convention on Human Rights, overseen by the European Court. Yeah. That's the way it embeds itself within domestic law. Now, Parliament is sovereign, but so this is not the rule of lawyers; it's the rule of law. So if we make a law, judges have to follow it. Where it's going wrong here is the interpretation of that law is not clear. And it's not up to date.
Well, the thing is, it is clear. I mean, if you read Article 8, it's 2 paragraphs. They just read the first paragraph and seem to apparently be unable to read any further.
Yeah, well, that's right. So we need to clarify the point, is that the safety and security of British citizens should override any issues around human rights for a foreign national who's committed offence in the UK.
Your party leader, Kemi Badenoch, she's been in Epping this morning and she's been meeting some of the protesters who protested around the Bell Hotel, one of the asylum hotels. I was sent her an interactive map over the weekend, which is very clear, not to be used for criminal purposes, showing where all local asylum hotels are, well, in any area. But certainly I was able to see the number that are in my local area, one very, very near my home that I was able to identify, and I've been to visit them. Very, very, very unfriendly reaction I certainly got from the now private hotel housing illegal migrants. Do you think it's justified for people to be protesting? And do you support local people protesting their local asylum hotels as long as they remain peaceful?
Yes, of course I do. We believe in freedom of speech in this country. People should be able to peacefully protest about anything. So, yes, of course. I mean, I had an asylum centre planned for my constituency somewhere just north of York, Linton-on-Ouse, and I took part and led, in fact, a very vociferous campaign against that, because I did think it endangered potentially the local residents and made life just unbearable for local residents. Luckily, we were successful. So I would never stand in the way of somebody peacefully protesting against something they're very concerned about. People are worried. You know it, Julia. I know it. People are worried. You cannot expect people to stay quiet when they're worried about their safety.
But again, they need to know there's a deliberate policy for people not to be allowed to know when they're asylum hotels. Now, this government and your government had actually, they pledged to, end the use of asylum hotels, but it's been continuing. But what they're doing instead is they've got organisations and companies like Serco and others, and they are basically renting out or on a huge long contract, often paying up to double local expected rents on the market rate to basically house these migrants. There are some councillors are talking about actually, whole streets of homes, whole new housing developments meant for local people are basically being taken up to be housing asylum seekers. There is an element where once these people are out of these hotels, we won't know where we are. There'll be not there's any real tracking of where they are anyway. We will have no idea of knowing where they are. And at least parents who can say, I am worried, like, the Bell or the other asylum hotels in Canary Wharf and otherwise, they can actually say, I know that that's an asylum hotel. I'm worried about the behaviour by the men there towards my teenage daughter. They can avoid that area. When these people are just in every local street, largely, by the way, in poorer areas where those rents are more affordable for the Home Office to pay for, we're not going to have a clue who these people are and where they are.
Right. No, he's right. And what their approach is, this crazy approach of smashing the gangs to solve this problem, which we know won't work. You're just playing whack-a-mole. People, you smash one gang, another one will pop up. That's not going to work. All they're doing instead is that people are coming here, and that's a 50% increase on last year. They're racing through the asylum system to get them out of hotels to put them in private rented accommodation, exactly as you were saying, which creates even more of an incentive to come here in the first place. Labour's in this doom loop, which it claims is a solution. It's actually a disastrous policy, and they won't confront the reality, as many observers have said, including people from all sides of the political spectrum, that the only way you deal with this is put a proper deterrent in place. And that deterrent has to be deportation to a third country where your asylum claim is heard. And if it's successful, you stay in that country.
But it needs to be everyone. It needs to be everyone. It can't be 250 people,
exactly right.
Which is what the plan was. OK. You said earlier you support people who peacefully protest. Do you support then the 522 people who peacefully protested in Parliament Square at the weekend? They were arrested for holding signs up saying, I oppose genocide, I support Palestine Action, Palestine Action being a proscribed terrorist group?
Well, I think the government's got itself in a total mess with this, to be honest. I mean, I'm not a supporter of Palestine Action in terms of the group, but I think many people who were protesting weren't doing so because they associated themselves with it's been defined as a terrorist group. They were concerned about Palestine, and who is not?
Well, they can do that without supporting the Palestine Action, then, can't they?
Yes, and that's what they should do. But I think the government's going to see hundreds more people being arrested, and I just don't see this as a tenable situation to deal with this. But I want
to clarify then. It's not tenable, so you shouldn't be arresting them. So it's OK to support a prescribed terrorist group?
Well, of course not.
Well, then they should be arrested.
It was this government who defined it as such. Now it's defined it as that. Of course, it has to follow through with that action. And I would urge anybody...
You don't think it should be a prescribed terrorist group?
I'm not... That's not what I'm saying. But because apparently some information I don't have access to about the security implications of Palestine Action. But what I would urge anybody, if you're going to protest against what's happening in Palestine, and there are good reasons.
There's no country called Palestine.
Gaza, right? I was just correcting myself.
Sorry.
And then do so outside a protest organised by Palestine Action, because clearly that is a group that many people have security concerns about, but I don't think any problem in protesting against some of the problems we're seeing in Gaza. OK,
just finally, let's talk about the small matter of 35 billion quid of our hard-earned taxpayers' money that's going to go to the Mauritian government for unfeasible reasons, as far as I can tell, for the Chagos deal. Keir Starmer had claimed that we're looking at a £3.4 billion bill for the people say return, no, the giving away of the Chagos Islands in the middle of the Indian Ocean to Mauritius. But in fact, according to a Freedom of Information request, it's going to cost 10 times that, as he claimed. What do you make of 35 billion quid, given the state of our public finances right now? £51 billion black hole identified by an economic institute only last week in the public finances, but 35 billion going to the Mauritian government?
The whole thing's a bad joke, to be honest. It's completely ridiculous. Giving away our sovereign territory and then renting it back is just completely ludicrous. Lying about the numbers involved, which clearly he has done, tries to manipulate that information. I mean, it just shows that Keir Starmer is more interested in his lefty legal friends than he is the everyday citizens of this country. It's completely ludicrous. There was no need for it. he charged headlong down that route because of some obscure legal judgment somewhere. And really, just there was no necessity.
But to be fair,
this.
You guys didn't come to the table and actually agree a deal. But under the Tories, there were negotiations. That should never have happened.
Well, discussions always happen.
You started the ball rolling.
I was never in those rooms.
I would guess that. I would imagine you would give that short shrift. Yes.
Well, I certainly would have done, and I can't. James cleverly tells me he was giving it short shrift as well. So that sometimes you have to have discussions, but to actually do this, move on from efforts around diplomacy to actually giving away your own territory, then renting it back to the tune of £35 billion, when with so many other pressures on our public finances, is completely ludicrous. It is a bad joke, but it characterises a couple of things: Keir Starmer's general approach to the citizens of this country, and his ability to negotiate, which is clearly terrible.
It's genuinely shocking. I would not let that man buy me a Mars bar. I really wouldn't. I ended up paying £50 for it. Kevin Hollinrake, great to talk to you, Chairman.